Hello friends and welcome to my channel. My name is Wendy Bertinoli and this is my watercolor journey. This is the end of month 1 and so I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what I have learned and how I have grown in this last month. It has been kind of a whirlwind because I have had to learn so many new things, not just the watercolor, but I've had to learn how to film on YouTube for YouTube and how to upload and do all of that. Luckily, I have been a photographer for about 8 years, so editing is not really an issue. I actually love editing the videos. I also have a podcast, so I had learned how to do voiceover, that sort of thing. So that has not been a problem. It is just learning YouTube and learning how to watercolor and feeling like I have the time to be able to do it all. So that's kind of my challenge right now. But I wanted to share some of the things that I've learned about watercolor in this first month of painting. And also wanted to mention that I have bipolar, so this has been a therapeutic journey for me too, because I have realized how much creativity and the flow of the water and just all of the things that go into watercolor have really helped me stay balanced with bipolar, which has been incredibly surprising and lovely. I mean, I just love that it is becoming a benefit in that way as well. So what I'm going to do is work on a watercolor project. While I am talking to you, I will try to explain what I'm doing. I have also come to know several YouTubers that watercolor and have learned from them, so I will mention that as I go along. So I hope you'll stay with me and join me as I talk about this first month's journey. So when I began, my husband had gone on a trip with my stepson to Atlanta, and I didn't want to spend all that time alone. They were going to be gone for 3 days, so I decided that I would start watercoloring. And these are all of the things that I found on Pinterest or on YouTube that I learned. That's a color smashing technique that I learned from Christy Rice. I learned doodling techniques. All of these things I did just from looking at pictures. That was one of the first things that I traced, or I drew myself and then tried to watercolor. This was my favorite rose on a soft paper that I found on Amazon. I really liked the way that one turned out. And of course, you can see I loved doing the roses. That was a lot of fun. I added in the birds, and this flower picture was one of the last things that I created before they got home. And I had them all laid out on the counter when my husband got home. Now this sunflower was one of the first ones that I drew and did myself, as well as the rose. And you can see how the rose stained and puddled on the Canson watercolor paper. And that's one of the reasons that I don't like that paper. I tried doing profile pictures or faceless people. And also this poppy was one of my last ones, or the anemones was one of my last ones I did. I tried abstract painting, and then of course the ones that you have all seen on YouTube that I've put up. The butterfly is one that I drew myself from a picture, and the sunflowers I drew from a book. And so I feel like I'm coming along. I found that the wet on wet technique is one of my favorite. I did take a course from a man named Broderick Wong, and that's all the sea animals were from his class. I learned how to work in washes and layering. And so that's been a lot of fun. And then, of course, I've still been trying to put photos up on YouTube. This daffodil was the last one that I put up. And I even tried to paint a ballerina. One of the flowers that I did this one here, it ended up looking like a ballerina tutu. So I thought that I would draw the ballerina after that. And so that's been really fun to learn all of these new techniques. The book that I'm going to be using today is from Sara Berenson, and it was one of the books that I bought when my husband was out of town, and I just really like the way that she taught in it. And so one of the techniques that I'm going to use is this daisy here, the daisy grouping. But I liked all of the ways how you could trace them, and then she teaches you exactly how to go wet and wet, wet on dry, what colors to do. And so we are going to do the coneflowers today, is the design that I'm going to do for you. So I have already gone ahead and traced it. I just traced it really, really lightly. This is vellum paper, and then I use the graphite with a stylus sitting there at the side. You can see that, and I just tape it down onto the design, and then I use the graphite paper underneath the vellum, and you can see that one's been used a lot. You just put it underneath there, and then you trace over those lines. And I made this pattern before. I've done this design once before, and like I said, I just kind of lightly go over the lines. You don't want to make a divot into your paper. So with the stylus, you want to just go lightly over the lines, and I just kind of draw what I need. I didn't do all the petals. I did the one or the two so I could see the length of the petal, but on the rest I just kind of marked where the leaves go, marked where the center of the cone is going to go, and the stems, and that's all I did. And you can see that it's pretty light, and I missed that one stem, it looks like. So I'm going to go back and just place that mark there. And now I am ready to go with my coneflowers. Okay, so before I get started, I wanted to talk about paper and water and colors. I started out with this paint palette here. I don't even know what the name of it is. It doesn't have a name on it, but I just picked it up from Joann's Hobbies and Crafts, and it had a lot of different colors. The thing that I ended up not liking about it is you can see the ones that I've used are the darkest colors because they were the most vibrant. They were very pastel and washed out, which is one of the things that I did not like about it. And so I ended up just using the really, really dark colors because those were the ones that showed up on the paper. I then found a YouTuber, her name is Shada Campbell, who I really like. And in the description of one of her videos, she was talking about the Mungyo palette, which has 48 colors, and I believe it is a student grade. So a little bit of an upgrade from the paint that I was using, actually quite a bit of an upgrade. And I really liked not having to worry about mixing my colors, just having so many colors available to me. I still really like that and use it a lot. You can see the wells in those. I use that quite a lot. And I have used that on some of my videos that I've put on YouTube as well. So some of the YouTubers that I have followed are Christy Rice. I really like her. She has a very creative, free style, and I really like that about her. I also really loved Jenna Rainey, and you can see that I have now switched over from the Canson paper. I'm talking here about the Arches 140-pound cold press paper, 100% cotton. It has been the best thing. I love the way that color bleeds with the Arches paper. So switching over to professional paints, I switched to the Winsor Newton paints. I bought a few of them, and I also found the ceramic palette, which I really like mixing my colors in the ceramic palette. And I also got the bamboo soap dish to store my brushes in because they can store flat and it's better for drying your brushes out. Those are some of the things that I've learned, is that you don't want to leave your brush in water. You don't want to dry it out to like dab it hard on a paper towel. You want to just dry it, and in fact pinch out the color is the best way to do it, and then let them dry flat. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this painting. The De Winton Paper Company is another YouTuber that I really like. The butterfly and the coneflower that I showed you before is one that she taught as a tutorial. There's just been so many. CC Creations is another one that I really, really like. So many YouTubers that I've learned from. And then, of course, many on Pinterest, where I've grabbed pictures from them. So yeah, it's just been a really, really fun journey. And like I said, it's just been so therapeutic as well. And I did take a class from Broderick Wong, which I showed you some of the animal photos from his class, or watercolors, not photos. And I have just learned so much about layering and wet on wet and dry on wet and washes and all of the different things. So it's just really been a lot of fun. So I'm going to start with the center of the flowers here, and then we'll move on from there. Oh, one of the things I wanted to mention is that I don't typically mix on, well, I do sometimes mix on the aluminum. I just have found that it doesn't mix as well. I find that it doesn't mix as well. For me, it tends to, the colors tend to like kind of fall to the bottom if it's a heavier color that you're mixing. And so I just have really liked the ceramic better. It seems to hold the water and the color for a longer period of time. Of course, the heavier colors still do fall to the bottom. You can see that one of the YouTubers that I followed suggested that you put the tubes in the tray and let them dry, which I did, but I have not really liked that process because even though you don't use as much paint, it takes so much longer to get your paints to wake up. And so I'm just kind of trying to use up those paints so that I can just start using the tubes. And I am using the Princeton size 6 round brush. I like the size 6, the size 4, the size 2, the 10 and the 8 are some of my favorites. So again, I'm going to use the round size 6 Princeton Heritage brush for this. And we're just going to go into the orange here and get a good amount on there. I've already mixed it, as you can see. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that first wash on the stamen and on the centers of the coneflowers. I'm going to take these bracelets off. And one of the things that I have noticed is that getting used to the amount of water on the brush has been tricky. Broderick Wong, in his class from Udemy, he teaches a lot about strong, medium, and weak in your levels of water to paint. And so that's been really helpful, I think, in kind of getting used to the mixture of paint, the ratios, water to paint. So, and I'm just tapping out, and he teaches to squeeze out the water and then sip up that little bead that's left. And that really helps with the pooling, so that you don't get the pooling, and also so that you don't get the staining on your paper or the watermarks on your paper. So I have really enjoyed learning from him and learning his technique of just pulling that bead down as you go, and then just squeezing out the water and sipping up the what's left. So that's been one of the techniques that I have learned, and then just pulling that bead down again and all the way around. And of course, you could just go through these really fast and do them, and that would be fine. But I just am trying to really cement some of those techniques in my mind. So I am trying to follow the things that I've learned. So this is the permanent rose that I'm using here. And I'm just pulling and pressing and just bringing that into a round point. And then I'm just kind of dragging that bead up to the center, because that's where I want the depth to be, is towards the base of the flower. And so we're just going to go ahead and do all of these leaves, and you should have plenty of water on your brush that you can do a couple of the petals at a time. And again, I'm just kind of moving that bead up to the top because I want a little bit of depth there. So that's where I want that deeper color to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish the petals here. One of the things that I really love to do, if you've been watching me on YouTube and in the videos, is I love the wet on wet look. So I'm just dipping some of the quinacridone, I believe that's how you say it, magenta, and just letting that drain down the petal. I just love the effect, as you have seen on YouTube, of that bloom that comes with dropping the paint into the wet paint, the darker paint into the wet paint. So you can see how fun that is, that it just kind of starts to bloom out. And this will make a really nice shadowing at the center of the flower. And I really, really like that look. So continuing on to the other petals, and like I said, I'm just getting used to filming, so you see a bit of my head there in the photo. That has been one thing that has been so hard, is learning how to manipulate or work YouTube with the algorithm, and figuring out keywords and finding people. And, because my dream in doing this, when I decided to put my journey on YouTube, was so that I could earn the money through affiliate links, and hopefully at some point I'll be able to get monetized, that I will be able to earn the money to buy a ticket at least once a month to go visit my grandchildren, which I have 6 grandchildren right now, 1 more on the way, a little girl. So I will have 4 granddaughters and 3 grandsons. And a couple of them live in Houston and the others live in Utah. And so I just wanted to be able to fund my way to be able to do that, so it's not a strain on our finances, and just feel like I am contributing in that way. You can see on this, I'm just kind of bending the petal a little bit on the side of that petal that is kind of tilting in a little bit, and I'll probably, after this dries, go ahead and add a couple more petals to that one just to make it a little more full. We'll go ahead and add in that magenta again. So, as I said, my grandkids all live in Utah and Houston, and so my plan is to be able to travel to visit them once a month or once every other month. Right now it's once or twice a year, which is just not enough when those little babies are growing. So that is one of my dreams. I'm going to go ahead and paint this petal. As I was pointing out, the stems, I'm going to go ahead and wait until the paint dries completely, because I don't want that green paint to bleed into the pink. I want to keep that pink really pretty solid pink, other than the bleed at the base of the petals. So one of the other things that I've learned is how you hold the brush matters, and I do find that it's easier for me to turn the paper as I paint. It's not easy to do when you're filming. It shows much better to not turn your paper, so I'm trying to learn how to turn my wrist, turn my hand, turn my arm instead of, or turning the brush instead of turning the page, because I know that can be hard to watch when, especially when videos get sped up, to follow that when the page is getting turned all around at all different angles. And I like to mix my paint with a different brush. This is a Fine Touch. This was just a cheaper brand that I found at Hobby Lobby in a package. And I find that mixing with a different brush is better because then it doesn't ruin the bristles of your brush. So I'm just mixing up with that brush, mixing up my paint, and then I'm going to switch, like I said, to my size 2 to do the fine tips of the cone. On both sides of the flower, on both sides of the cone, I'm sorry. So I'm just taking short, little tiny strokes. This is a dry on dry technique. So you let the flower completely dry, and then you go back with your darker color and do the little stamen. That's one of the things that I've learned that's really important and really, really difficult for me, is to let the paint completely dry. And you can see where that color kind of bled into the orange a little bit, and I'm okay with that because I like the shadow that it's creating on the bottom of the stamen there. And so that was the bleed in from the pink, or from the magenta, when I dipped that in, and you can see the really nice gradation from that wet on wet technique that really creates a shadow in the petals. I really, really like that look. So I'm just going to add as many as I can here on all 3 stamen. As I was saying, the dry on dry technique, it's like you make one pass with your first color, usually the lightest color, and you wash one time. Basically, it's called a wash. And then your second wash would be the next darkest color, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and now draw out those stems. I am going to use my size 6 brush. Before I do that, I'm going to draw in some extra petals here, just to kind of fill out those flowers so there aren't any big spaces. So I'll probably put a couple in this flower, and then a couple in the flower on the right. I think the left one looks pretty good, so I'm not going to worry about that one. And I am going to add in one here. And now I'm going to go to my size 4 brush, my Princeton Heritage brush. Again, you can see that I'm still trying to get used to where to hold my items when I put them up to the phone. Actually, so I'm going to go ahead and add those stems now with the size 2 brush. I'm just very gently pressing on the tip. And this just takes a lot of practice. And I'm still not great at it, but I am getting there. And then pulling down from that center. And because I have let my paint completely dry, I can get up really close to that base of that petal without the color bleeding in. And then, oh, there's one of my cat's hairs. Fitz, you may see him in some of my videos, some of my future videos. He likes to hang around wherever I'm at. So I'm just pushing that paint down. I'm going to drop in some darker, that is just a little hooker's green with a little bit of neutral tint in it to get that darker. And the hooker's green on the left in the dish that you see, I have just placed a little bit of yellow, cadmium yellow with that so that it is more of a lime green color. And so I'm just using those 2 colors for the leaves, just kind of dropping in that darker at the bottom of the leaf. And I will probably pull that down on the stems. and just point, press, and lift on the leaves. This is a little bit smaller of a brush. I'm just kind of giving that some motion, just kind of tipping that leaf over just a little bit. That's one of the other things that I've learned is you want to create some motion with your leaves and your flowers so they're not just all straight. Getting better at that. And again, just adding in some of the darker green here and giving that some more depth. I'm going to go ahead and do that on the petals as well. I'm going to outline just around the edge of the petals to give them some depth. For those of you that are following me and following this journey, I sure do appreciate you, and I am looking forward to getting better and better and really being able to teach you some of the things that I've learned. Of course, I'm at no point right now to be really teaching anybody much. I'm still just really learning so much myself, but I can share what I am learning. And so that is what I'm trying to do at this point. And maybe by the end of the year, when I feel more confident, I will be able to, and if you make a mistake, you just dab it up there. That's another thing I've learned is that it is pretty forgiving as long as it's not a staining color like permanent red or something like that. Usually when you make a mistake, you can just dab your paper towel on there and the color will come right up. It's called lifting. You can also do it with your brush, with a dry brush. You can lift color off of your paper. So that's a nice technique. And as I said, I am just going to share all of these techniques that I learn as I go along and hopefully give you some fun things to look at and enjoy along the way. Just darkening up the edges of the petal and putting some lines or veins into the petals here and giving it some depth and detail. And I am going to, after I get these veins done, I'm going to go around the edge of the petal and then I'm just going to make a line and then I'll probably fade that out with a little bit of water just so the lines aren't so harsh. I have really enjoyed lining all of my designs with black marker, and I think that's just because it distracts from the pooling of the paint and the watermarks that I don't really like. And so I've just kind of gotten in the habit of doing that. And while I do really, really like that look and it's a fun look, kind of more of a doodle look, it is not generally what most watercolorers do. Most of your detail is done with paint, not with a marker. So that is something that I am trying to learn how to not have the paint pool and leave watermarks and still kind of get that detail and loveliness that I really like in the finished product. So I think we've got about all the lines on here. You can see how much more detailed that is looking. So as I said, I'm just going along the edges here of the petals. We're just getting near the end here. One thing that I do want to talk about, because I want to share my journey with bipolar as well with you, because I feel like it's so important to be able to talk about these sorts of things. And the watercolor, as I said, has become something that has been really helpful for me. While I am medicated, I also still struggle day to day. It's, medication is not a cure-all. We still have our days where it's up and down, and I think here I'm just kind of pointing out where the shadow would come from the sun, and typically the sun would be to the left and shining down. So I'm kind of, or typically I would have lined on the other side, but just not quite thinking about that yet. But just trying to get kind of the shading of the petals on top of each other. Anyway, back to mental illness. I just think it's so important that we share our journeys, and I'm adding some water in here to just kind of blend that in a little bit. Just so important to share where we're at in our journeys. And like I said, I'm on medication, but it's not a cure-all. I still have my days that are hard, and I still have to find ways to manage the illness. And I do have a video that I can link that talks about how some of the things that I've done to manage my illness. And, I just think when you find things like this watercoloring that I've picked up that help your mental state, your mental attitude, it's just so smart to keep up those habits. And so because that weekend when my husband was out of town, when I started watercoloring, and I found that it was so therapeutic for me, so relaxing, and I tend towards the manic part of bipolar. So for me, I really have to maintain a low stress level and keep myself relaxed and calm and balanced so that I don't get too much going on and too many things stressing me out that it causes a problem. So I'm just adding in the veins here. We're just finishing up. And as I said, I want to thank you all for following me on YouTube. I hope that you will click to subscribe and follow along on my Instagram and my Facebook page. And I just appreciate everything that you do. And I hope you come back and see me again real soon.